Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into what I think is just a wild contradiction. I mean, think about it. How did a country that's globally famous for flat-pack furniture, super infectious pop music, and this really steadfast dedication to peace begin its life as Europe's absolute most feared military empire? It's a story of incredible transformation, and we're going to unpack exactly how that happened. Okay, let's look at this stunning juxtaposition. How in the world did an aggressive, constantly expanding military powerhouse from the 1600s eventually become the totally neutral welfare state we know today? Well, to really get it, we have to look at how pure necessity and geography shaped these people.
To understand Sweden, we gotta go way back to its origins. The harsh, freezing northern environment of Scandinavia bred this incredibly resilient, adaptable society that basically had to turn to the ocean just to survive. The Viking Age wasn't just about raiding, It was really born out of this rugged landscape that made traditional farming super difficult, which pushed these early communities to completely master the seas.
And honestly, their reach was just astounding. Using these highly advanced longships, which brilliantly were designed for both deep open oceans and super shallow rivers, they didn't just pull off famous raids like the one at Lindisfarne in 793 AD. No, they set up massive, highly complex trade networks. We're talking exchanging furs, slaves, and amber all the way down to the Byzantine Empire and Baghdad. They even reached the shores of North America. They were basically the ultimate medieval explorers.
So that brings us to part one, rise of an empire and their military zenith.
Fast forward a bit, and we see Sweden totally transforming from a collection of medieval tribes into this fiercely centralized, formidable state under the Vasa dynasty. This is the moment Sweden really steps onto the world stage, quite literally with a sword in hand. You can see on this timeline their explosive rise during the 30 Years' War, pushing their borders way out across the Baltic. Backed by tons of natural resources like iron and timber, they became the undisputed masters of Northern Europe, only to suffer a truly catastrophic fall a century later during the Great Northern War.
Now, the guy driving a lot of that early explosive growth, King Gustavus Adolphus. And he didn't just lead armies, he fundamentally changed how wars were fought altogether. He's actually known as the father of modern warfare. He brought in these brilliant tactical innovations, like highly mobile artillery and super tightly coordinated infantry maneuvers, which is exactly what allowed a relatively small nation to just completely dominate the European continent.
You want to talk about sheer audacity? Just look at the Battle of Narva in 1700. Faced with this massive Russian army, you have a 15-year-old King Charles XII who was totally outnumbered. So what does he do? He uses a sudden, blinding snowstorm as cover to launch a daring surprise assault. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. They absolutely obliterated the Russian forces. It was a tactical masterpiece for sure. But, ironically, it also fueled this massive overconfidence that would eventually doom the empire.
Which brings us to part two, the great pivot, losing territory but finding a nation.
But look, constant war, it absolutely drains a nation. After years of severe overextension, dwindling resources, and a totally devastating loss at the Battle of Poltava in 1709, which pretty much broke the Swedish Empire, the country had to completely reinvent itself. So, following the death of their absolute monarch, Charles XII, Sweden enters what's known as the Age of Liberty. Power shifted drastically away from the crown and into the hands of the decentralized Riksdag parliament. These were the very first crucial seeds of Swedish democracy, shifting focus to internal growth and economics rather than just conquering their neighbors.
The real breaking point, though, the thing that literally changed their national DNA, was losing Finland to Russia in 1809. It was a profound trauma for the nation, but it led to this incredibly pragmatic move, crowning French Marshal Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte as the new heir. And it was Bernadotte who fundamentally steered Sweden away from constant European conflicts, choosing strategic diplomacy instead.
All right, part three. The Swedish model, and building the people's home.
With borders finally settled thanks to the 1814 Treaty of Kiel where they acquired Norway, Sweden stopped looking outward for conquests and really started looking inward. This era gives birth to the famous Swedish model. It's this highly successful but delicate balancing act. On one side, you've got fierce, competitive capitalist giants driving heavy industry. Think companies like Volvo, Ericsson, and Saab. But on the other side, a comprehensive social welfare system fueled by progressive taxation, ensuring full employment and strong social security. Basically, it's capitalism funding a deep, reliable social safety net.
So, what was the glue holding this delicate model together? It was the 1938 Saltsjöbaden Agreement. Instead of constantly fighting, these powerful labor unions and major employers sat down and actually agreed to a cooperative framework. They essentially wiped out crippling strikes overnight, paving the way for decades of unprecedented harmonious economic stability, a real game changer for them.
Moving right along to part 4, cultural soft power, taking mythology and turning it into a global export.
As the economy boomed, so did their soft power. With secure borders and a super stable society, Sweden started turning its historical Viking mythology into this massive global cultural export. Around the turn of the 20th century, you see the National Romanticism movement really take hold. Composers like Andreas Holén started infusing classical music and grand operas with Viking myths. And this wasn't just art happening in a vacuum, it was a deliberate, state-supported strategy. That early push laid the exact music infrastructure and international networking that turned Sweden into the pop music exporting superpower we recognize today.
And finally, Part 5, Modern Global Peacemaker and the Art of Neutrality.
Now, this massive internal cultural and economic explosion, it was only possible because it was shielded by a very strict and, occasionally controversial policy of official neutrality through World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. But get this, by stepping away from the battlefield, they became absolute champions of the peace table. Nearly 800,000 Swedish citizens have actively participated in UN humanitarian and peacekeeping missions all over the world. That is a staggering commitment for a nation of its size.
And it's not just the government. The public is entirely on board with this global responsibility. Looking at this data, a massive chunk of the population fully supports or actually demands an increase in foreign humanitarian aid. The state's foreign policy is quite literally a direct reflection of what the public values. So, the fearsome warriors of the 17th century, they're now the medics and mediators of the 21st.
And this whole drive to protect and preserve, it actually extends right down to the planet itself. Today, Sweden shows massive environmental leadership, rolling out these aggressive, pioneering policies aiming to become completely carbon neutral by 2045. They are pouring investments into wind and solar and really transitioning into a circular economy with incredibly rigorous recycling programs. It's just an incredible journey, isn't it? Going all the way from the longships of the Vikings and the mobile artillery of Gustavus Adolphus straight to the boardrooms of the UN and the bleeding edge of climate science. So as we wrap up this look at an incredible transformation, I'll leave you with this to ponder. Can a nation's history of brutal war and imperial overreach be the exact catalyst needed to finally master the art of peace? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the history behind the headlines.